Welcome handheld retro gamers. My previous video I covered a short review on the RG35xx as I finally managed to get my hands on one, but it worked out a pretty great time as we now have access to an OS that really helps this product, making it a worthy participant in a quite saturated market. No other less than Black Sheriff got behind on making a dedicated OS for this handheld called Garlic OS, who has done some great previous work on Caster and other aftermarket firmwares. As we know, the stock OS for the RG35xx did not work as well as we hoped, and it did need help with emulation to be more accurate, stable, and bring more features that this handheld is capable of doing. So he has stepped up to support us handheld gamers. Since the release there has been updates nearly every week or even more. In the making of this video we are now on version 4.1.9. In the words of Black Serif, it is a fast and easy to understand operation system that would make the Mio Mini Onion OS users feel right at home with its similar look and feel. Think of it as a natural evolution of my previous RetroArch port of the RG35xx with fully working sleep mode, improved button mounting, a whole new user interface and several under the hood bug fixes. Which if you go ahead and check out his main page, he has gone to a great detail to show what all the updates are all about. So let's go ahead and get this all set up. Later on I'll go into more details and benefits of this OS update. But first I recommend downloading the software if you haven't already, or you may have access to something that does the same job. But this is what I used. I got FAT32 formatter, 7-zip, or you can use something like WinRAR, Berliner Etcher and Disk Genie. So get them all installed so you're up and ready. A link will be provided below that'll take you to a page to access all the downloadable links. Now, the first step is to first download the ISO image from his page found at the bottom of this post, where there is two files to grab on the right hand side. These two files then you download and place them into one folder to where you can extract the ISO image using the software, for example 7-zip or WinRAR. The files on the left hand side are for you to download and to update a pre-existing setup SD card, so leave them for later on in the future. Now we have our Garlic OS image ready. All we have to do is put it on an SD card. So open up the software Berliner Etcher and simply select the Garlic OS image. And now get your SD card ready. I went for the 32GB scan disk. I pop that into the computer and then select that as the source to transfer it over to. And select flash. Now this will take a while to transfer over, about 5 to 10 minutes. And let that to verify. Then when that's complete, you may have a fair few pop-ups popping up on your screen. That is because this ISO image has converted the SD card into multiple drives. Now one thing you need to do first is to back up the ROMs folder that you would find located in one of these drives. I'll explain a bit more details in that later, but put that somewhere safe. Now we open the software Disk Genius and select the SD card that we have now put in the PC, and you will see there has the multiple drives. There are 4 drives altogether. The one that we are interested in to select is the FAT32 formatted one, which you will find at the bottom here on the top middle part of the screen. This will indicate that the drive has 26GB of free space that can't be used. So now we make that available to give us more space to use on this new formatted SD. To put more ROMs on there. Now on the left hand side of the screen, select the drive that was the FAT32. In my case it was drive G. Right click that and select resize partition. Now on this menu we drag the left hand side blue bar onto the right hand side to utilize the amount of space. Then you click start. You will get a fair bit of pop-ups regarding to be safe and back up this SD card, but then the process should be underway. But if this doesn't, you will need to close the software, perhaps eject the SD card and just restart the process again. Mine was lucky and this was done in the first time. It just didn't take too long at all for this to be all set up. So essentially this is now all complete, but I do like to test to see if that space is now available. I'll click on the drive and see its space altogether, and we are all good. There is just a couple of more steps now to do on this SD card to set this up, and that is to transfer your BIOS files over. Otherwise disk-based systems and arcade titles will not work, and RetroArch will have limited functionality with certain cores. So locate the CFW folder that you will find in one of these drives and click the RetroArch folder and then click it again, and then you find the systems folder. Place all your BIOS files in there. I can't recommend where you can locate and download these BIOS files, but give a simple Google and that will do the job. One thing to consider is that you are using a handheld that has Linux OS with RetroArch built in, and it does expect certain BIOS files to be compatible with certain cores. A page has been created to show you which ones are compatible with this system, which is awesome. I ended up just throwing out all the BIOS files that I had already downloaded from the past and just dragged them all in and hope for the best. As mentioned earlier about backing up that ROM folder, this was because it has all the correct ROM folder structure in the right place. So now you can use an alternative SD card to put your ROMs on, or even use both. To set this up, you need the second SD card. Here you need to format this to FAT32 using the FAT32 formatted software. Pop your second SD card in. I used a 64GB ScanDisk, and make sure you have all the folders closed on your PC to start the formatter. Now this second SD card is in the right format to use in the second slot for the RG35xx. Now open up that ROMs folder and then you transfer all those name folders of all the systems onto the root of this second SD card. Again, head back to that website as I mentioned earlier to find its ROM compatibility for each system. But the compatibility for the ROMs for each system is very high, so you may not have to go in your way to check out what is going to work with it. Once you have all your ROMs in the right folders that you want to use for this system, you're ready to safely eject this SD card and pop them both into the handheld, as it's all ready to boot up. So awesome, pretty excited to get this all set up and give this a good testing. So here's a quick review on the OS as it currently stands. Thanks for you guys for sticking around. This boot time is around the same time. You will see a custom theme that I've already applied, which looks pretty sweet. I'll show you how to do that later on in this video. By pressing the start button, you can bring up the time and date that is set to this handheld, which is a pretty handy trick for some games to get a certain time and date to unlock certain features. So we have 4 tiles to choose from. One is the favorite folder, got a couple set already. We have our console selection and our backend RetroArch that does all the emulation, where you can set up the main configuration if you like. But bear in mind this OS has this all set up for each core with its recommended settings. Personally, I like to use the integer scale and keep the aspect ratio to really make the most of the clarity of the image, which is how the games were designed in the first place. Make sure you do save your configuration each time to really keep your settings. Just one thing I like to do is by heading to the user interface settings and then selecting appearance, you can then choose the color of the RetroArch theme. This one looks pretty tight. So this time around, coming from the stock OS, Game Boy Color will now have an improved frame rate and clarity, as it has further compatibility with this core that has been applied. But it does add that slight blur because it's not keeping the original aspect ratio that the Game Boy Color was intended to be. I do love a bit of croc on the go here, but by tapping the home button, it does bring you back to the main menu. Heading to the recent section then brings you the last played titles. You will find that each title that you select with the arcade games, it will boot up from the beginning, but by selecting a home console or handheld game that you recently played, it will then boot up to the moment that you quit it, creating a temporary save file, which is pretty awesome as it creates a fluid and fast type of feel and experience jumping into one game to another. Pretty awesome. With any game booted up, holding down the home button will then give you a map and guide to see what trigger shortcuts are available, like for fast forward, rewind, cheat, show FPS and more. One fun thing I like to do by pressing the home button and X together will then bring you the RetroArch menu, where you can have some fun with applying some borders. There's a nice pre-built Game Boy Color one here. But as I have integer scale mode off, this will be covering up too much of the screen. Taking a closer look now at the borders, you can tell. To amend this, head to your RetroArch settings, then press B to go back to the main settings. Click, then settings, then video, then scaling, and then put integer scale on and keep that aspect ratio. Remember to save your configuration settings to apply this when you load up your next game. And there we go, that looks much better. Now let's quit out of this and head to some original Game Boy. it will automatically set the games to black and white. But we do have 4 frame rates now thanks to this OS, but we can have a bit of fun by changing the color modes, much like what we had back in the day with the original Game Boy Color. To set this up, get your RetroArch menu up by pressing the Home and X button together, go to Core Options and change the color of the Game Boy colorization to Eternal. You could fix this to one color set mode if you prefer. But by heading back to the game, you can then filter between different color modes by tapping the L1 and the R1. Pretty cool. I did notice that even some of the Game Boy Color titles would have some slowdowns, and also some arcade titles that would suffer as well. But you would think that this handheld should be able to run these pretty smoothly. But on the main menu interface, you would find by pressing select button, you can either decrease the power by 2 to extend the battery life at the cost of performance, or even boost it by 2 to get a better performance. This I found the results that the Game Boy Color games that suffered would now run really smooth, as well as the arcade titles and PlayStation 1, which is this handheld's limit on generation consoles to run, and still don't expect full compatibility with arcade FB Neo games, as you will still find some with slowdowns. With some updates and knowledge on certain tweakings, you probably could be able to fix this, but this is only a very minor number of arcade titles. By heading to 35xx.com that I mentioned earlier, they have got some updates like theme switcher, custom battery animation and a boot up screen. But for now, to change up your theme, head to the link below and just pick one that you want to download and feature on your handheld. Give that an unzip, then pop in your main SD card. Then locate your CFW folder, then you will find the skins folder. So then open up that one you just downloaded and then drag all the contents from that and then place that in that skins folder. This will then replace that to this new custom theme. And also in the near future, I can't see why not, we can get some minor DS and N64 with some PC Linux ports compatibility. So in all, this is a great update with a more stable OS than it originally came out with to pop on your RG35xx. It'll take some time to get used to with some very minor stability issues, but I'm sure some updates will be able to fix this. So thanks for sticking around, and I do hope that this video has supported the handheld gamers out there, and keep an eye out as I will be doing a versus video with the latest Miyoo handheld. I do love a good competition. So as always, if you like this video, hit that button. If you want to help and support, click subscribe, leave your comments below, and I'll catch you lot on my next video.